Tonight's tale. My Mind is Gone. Written by Martaneon. My mind is gone. I see him everywhere I go. I see him in every reflection, in every dark corner, and in the eyes of every person I see. My mind is gone. My life is over. Before you get the wrong idea, this isn't that kind of post. I'll still be alive for a long time after I post this. After all, once I do die, I'll be in his clutches. There is no escape. There is only delaying the inevitable. For those who read my last post, the him I'm talking about is the man with the weirdly shaped head that tormented my dear friend Violet. The man who turned my friend into a murderer. And the same man who I suspect had a hand in driving Craig's dad to kill those children. Now, these two cases seem to not have anything to do with each other at first glance. However, there is one connecting element. Me. I'm the one drawing this creature to the people I love. I'm the lightning rod for this entity's corruption. I tried my hardest to help put a stop to his machinations. However, there is no stopping him. I'll start where my last post left off. I'd gone to visit my childhood friend, Craig. I had to go out of state to visit. By the time the trip came up, I hadn't seen the man in weeks. Craig and I met up at a small coffee shop. He had wanted to meet up at a game store, but I wanted someplace a little quieter and with less people. He found me pretty easily. The tattoo that Violet had given me made me stick out of the crowd somewhat. If my experiences had moulded me, Craig's had shattered him. He was skinny. Very skinny. His skin was covered in prison tattoos, and his hair was buzzed almost to the scalp. He showed signs of prolonged drug abuse. His hand shook as he placed his deck on the tiny round table. It was hard to tell if he was currently using or not. His smile was warm and bright, and it felt quite nostalgic, in fact. His smile brought a smile to my own face, making my worries melt away like sweet ice cream. The two of us embraced over the table, almost knocking my half-drunk latte onto the floor. It had been 20 years since I had seen Craig, and my wait was now over. We sat down, and I ordered a mocha for Craig. His smile faded as he leaned in, getting serious. I'm not up for talking about what happened when we were kids. As you can see, it fucked me up big time. I know you might be looking for some kind of closure, but I'm not mentally capable of giving it now. I felt deflated, but I understood. He had answers, but those answers came from living with a monster since the day he was born. I can understand why he wouldn't want to talk about what had happened. I nodded. I intended to respect his wishes. Still, though, I needed answers. I need to get somewhere. I'd have to get them elsewhere, though. I heard about your friend, Violet. I'm sorry. I read about it in the newspaper, Craig said. The image of Violet, drenched in blood and regurgitated ink, flashed in my mind. I had almost forgotten it when I had been reunited with Craig. I stared into the coffee as the waitress brought over Craig's drink. I didn't know you could read, I said. I had hoped my joke would make Craig feel like I was doing better than I was. Craig was certainly caught off guard. He chuckled and remarked, "Yeah, I can also count all the way up to 11. His joke did actually lift my spirits a bit. I started looking over his tattoos. They were crude. I wasn't into criminal culture, so I didn't know the significance behind most of them. All I really knew was teardrop meant murder, which Craig, thankfully, didn't have. As I was gathering my thoughts, Craig pulled out his Magic the Gathering deck. Craig and I started playing. He whooped my ass hard. We talked about how things had been going in our lives. Apparently, Craig had gotten into programming. That put a point to Craig having made that hack. I asked if his dad was a programmer. His face got stern. Right. He didn't want to talk about that. He gave me a terse nod before returning with his turn. His dad was one too, so either of them could have made it. The conversation was tense for a moment, but I made another joke that made him snort mica out of his nose. Towards the end of our third game, my butt having been thoroughly kicked several times over by now, I showed Craig a drawing. It was a sketch of the man I had done while I was on the plane. He glanced at it, his face showing no sign of recognition. Dejected, I put the picture away. Craig played a card and said, "Okay, I destroy all your creatures." "Boy, if you're going to fuck me this bad, you should at least buy me dinner first," I remarked. "Maybe I will," Craig teased, bringing a slight flush to my cheeks. I cleared my throat and pulled at my collar. I hadn't expected that from Craig, nor that kind of reaction from myself. Well, the date sounded fun. I did have other things I wanted to do while I was here. I had signed up to test out a new sleeping drug. I needed to be at the lab in a couple of hours. It would give me a bit of money for me to use during this visit. So, anyways, I interjected a bit more loudly than I meant to, accidentally making the barista look our way. Watch any new anime?" "Well, nothing new, but I recently caught up on that time I got reincarnated as a slime," Craig said, leading into a conversation that lasted a good while. After Craig and I parted, we headed to the lab. It wasn't some extravagant building like you would see in the movies. It was just some small, nondescript building that looked like it had once been a laundromat. The interior looked professional enough. When I went to the front desk and presented my identification number and flashed my state ID, I was greeted by an older lady in a lab coat. She identified herself as Dr. Garcia. She had a calming voice. She seemed like the kind of woman I wish had been my own grandma. I had been stuck with a racist, sexist, homophobic southern cow who drove my grandpa into an early grave. Having a well-mannered scientist as a grandma would have been pretty sweet. Dr. Garcia walked me to a small curtained-off area and talked me through the procedures. There were some speakers that were designed to disrupt my sleep, basically stress testing the drug. They would keep me until about 3 in the morning, after which they would wake me up and send me on my way. Hopefully, my grogginess from the drug wouldn't lead me to walk into the street and reenact the insurance fraud mission from Saints Row. Dr. Garcia spent a frustratingly long time reviewing my medical information with me that I had already given over the phone when I signed up for this. After this, she took my vitals, had me change into a hospital gown, and put some sensors on me. Finally, she gave me a small cup with 2 white pills and a bottle of water. Finally, I'd been boring as hell. I was half asleep by now anyways. I lay down, closing my eyes, and allowed sleep to overtake me. I awoke in my childhood room, but it wasn't my normal childhood room. It was my room as depicted in that Pokemon hack from all those years ago. It looked like the real me though. I walked around the room, running my hand over the pixelated sheets. I seemed in control, so it must have been a lucid dream. I looked out the window. I could see Craig's dad's bedroom window. I felt dirty. A shiver went through my body. It almost felt like he was looking at me right now. I thought about myself being in that basement. I heard a familiar giggle, muffled by the closed door behind me. I turned quickly. It sounded like Violet. I ran to the door and opened it quickly. I heard footsteps running down the hall. I ran after, trying to catch up. I heard a splat as I stepped into the dining room. The floor was covered in blood. Not pixelated blood, like the rest of my surroundings, but real blood. My head throbbed. Whose blood was this? I heard Violet's giggling coming from the living room. Then I heard her say, "He looks like he could be sleeping." The next voice made my heart jump into my throat. "Yes, Violet, my dear. And what would he be dreaming about?" It was Craig's dad's voice. It sounded more floaty and sinister than I remember, but it was unmistakable. I swallowed my heart back down into my chest. I would need that for later. I then burst into the living room. Sitting on the couch was Craig. He both looked like he did as a kid, how he does now, and his NPC form from the hack. I couldn't tell if he was suddenly shifting between forms. It was just all 3 stacked on top of one another, or if he was made out of different parts of his 3 parts. Sleep. image hurt my eyes. His throat had a deep gash. The gash was mouthing words. I couldn't understand what it was saying. I couldn't read lips. Flanking each side of my childhood friend's corpse were Violet and Craig's dad. His dad looked at me through the glasses he never wore when I knew him. His eyes hungered for me, making my skin crawl. He smiled, exposing his yellowed, rotting teeth. Violet herself had blackened eyes, a strange ooze dripping from both of them, and her once ruby red lips. Violet skipped over to me, planting a sticky black kiss on my cheek. I went over to Craig's disorienting body. I put a hand on his chest, shaking slightly. At the bottom of my vision, I could see text appear. It is a corpse. I looked at Craig's dad. His smile spread wider and wider, exposing more teeth than existed in a human mouth. His mouth opened wide. A black ooze was gushing out of his mouth like a torrent of demonic ichor. From the darkness of his maw, I could see someone walking towards me. I turned quickly, my heart racing and threatening to burst out of my chest. I didn't want to see what was coming for me. I ran faster and faster, but I wasn't getting any farther away. Violet was laughing at me. Craig's neck wound was laughing at me too. I could hear the footsteps getting closer and closer. I had to escape, but couldn't. I looked over my shoulder. The man's face was poking out from Craig's dad's mouth, staring right at me. His eyes were wide, as if staring into my soul. My heart burst out of my chest, showering Craig's dad with viscera. I collapsed to my knees, staring into the man's wild, mad eyes. The man looked down at me. He spoke with my own voice. You've gone quite mad, Alice. Finally, his jaw unhinged, as if to swallow my head whole. A distorted, electronic alarm blared from his throat, finally wakening me from the dream. I sat up in bed, screaming loudly. Dr. Garcia came over and tried to comfort me. She ran me through some cognitive exercises to ground me back to reality. She reminded me one of the side effects of the drugs was the possibility of vivid dreams. I was huffing and puffing for a solid 10 minutes before I finally calmed down. After I got dressed, I called up Craig. I didn't know if he was at work or asleep. I hoped either way I wasn't disturbing him. He answered after a couple of rings. He had been doing some online gaming. I asked if I could crash on the couch. I needed to see him in person after that dream. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see that disturbing visage of Craig. He agreed to come pick me up. Dr. Garcia had given me a bunch of forms and a few other sleeping pills. It wasn't enough to overdose, just enough to continue the test in my everyday life. They knew I was on vacation. It was actually part of why they chose me to be part of the test. They wanted to see how the pills would affect people in unfamiliar environments. Craig soon arrived in his beat-up shitmobile. I'm not a car guy. I just know it had 4 wheels and a lack of mirror and lights where there were supposed to be those things. We got back to his place, which was basically a broom closet with a gamer setup. Craig asked me how the test went. I told him he didn't want to know, given the warning he gave me earlier. He was taken aback by that, but after a bit, he relented. I understand that what happened to you must have messed you up too, Craig said. If you want to tell me, tell me. I was silent for a while. During that time, the entirety of Karn's Freak on a Leash played on Craig's cracked phone. I eventually told him all about the dream. The description left him speechless. I could see a twinge of guilt in his eyes. He put a hand on mine. I doubt he knew what to say. And I wouldn't if I were in his shoes. I squeezed his hand, appreciating the gesture. We spent the rest of the night playing Street Fighter, eventually passing out on the bed around 6 or so. My dream was sleepless, thankfully. The next afternoon, Craig headed into work, leaving me on my own. While he was gone, I started doing some research on the man with the weirdly shaped head. All of my research kept bringing me back to Violet and the murder she had committed. She was still on the run. I called my parents, making sure they were okay. While my mom and brother were at work, my dad answered and put my fears to rest. I decided to take a walk to clear my head. I thought back to the man. I thought back to seeing him after Violet went on the run. Who was he? I thought about how Craig's dad seemed to almost birth the man from my dream. Was he seeing the man when he went mad? He had to have. When I knew Craig's dad, he didn't seem like a monster. Surely something was messing with him, causing him to do these things. No way a monster like that could raise someone like Craig. The days passed. I took the pills over the course of that time. However, each time, my sleep was dreamless. I kept hoping to go back to that dream and talk to the man again. The only slight dream I had during that time was on the second night when I saw a rabbit for a fraction of a second before the dreamlessness. As I spent more time with Craig, we grew closer. Even with his skinniness, him coming out of the bathroom in a towel made my heart flutter. I tried to remedy that skinniness with my home cooking. The money I was getting from the test was helping me pay for meals. I almost felt like a house husband for a bit. A thought that made me quite a bit giddy. On the 5th night, we were playing Street Fighter again. Craig had a few beers. I wasn't drinking because of the test. I was down to my last dice. Spirits were high. We caught each other's gaze as I finally got a victory against him. He made the first move by kissing me deeply. This kiss led to another thing I think you can guess. Afterwards, the two of us lay in each other's arms, breathing heavily. I didn't know these feelings had been bubbling between us when we first reunited. However, for the first time since I lost Violet, it had given me hope. I fell asleep, listening to his heartbeat. I had another dream. I was in the pixelated living room. Craig's corpse wasn't there. Neither were Craig's dad nor Violet. The blood was also gone. The only thing out of place was the phrase, "very, very light," written on the wall in ink. I looked around the house. No one was there. Where the hell could he be? I put a hand on my chest. There was still a hole in my chest from my last dream. Looking for this? My own voice asked from behind me. It was him. It was the man, holding my heart in his hand. I reached out to grab it, but suddenly it was gone. I stumbled as I phased through the man like he was made out of air. I turned to face him once again. Now he was on the other end of the room. With a blink, he was standing outside the window. Another blink, and I was awake, my face in Craig's tattooed chest. The test was over, so I turned in my paperwork that morning. Dr. Garcia talked over some things with me and gave me a phone number to call in case of emergencies. I received my final check. I decided to splurge and make some fajitas for Craig and I. As I walked around the grocery store collecting ingredients, I kept thinking back to the dream. The man seemed to be taunting me now. I had to see him again. The pills weren't a guarantee. They did help me into that dream realm. So I picked up some Benadryl to help me reach that state. I also picked up some beers for Craig and I to share. I thought about the night before. My plane ride home would be the next day. I didn't want to go. Call it foolish if you want, but I wanted to stay here with him. Sure, it wasn't glamorous, but there was something between us. So I did something reckless. I quit my job. When I got back, I made dinner for the two of us again and we got to talking. Craig was certainly shocked by my news. We weren't even officially together after all. I told him I wanted to change that. I told him I wanted to be with him. But we barely know each other. We haven't seen each other in over 20 years. We've only been back in touch for a week, Craig said, seemingly wanting me to see sense. However, I felt that I was already seeing sense. We talked for hours, going back and forth. He agreed to give things a shot, but he wanted to take things slow. He wanted me to get my own place and to build my own life before getting more serious. I agreed to his terms. That night was dreamless. So was the next night, and the next. Each night, I tried to get back into that dream realm, but was met with failure. Benadryl wasn't helping. We increased the dose. Still nothing. I would maybe hear some giggling right before waking up, but nothing more. This was getting so frustrating. I needed answers from this man. I wanted to know why he was doing the things he was doing. I had been putting in applications for dishwashing positions, eventually getting a job after a week and a half. Craig and I didn't see much of each other after that. He and I both worked irregular hours. Though I think he appreciated having an extra income in the home. He was certainly gaining some weight from my cooking. He was starting to look healthy. My family was super worried about me leaving so suddenly. They were rightfully freaked out, but they were glad things were seemingly working out for me. I had realised, after a while, this was certainly reckless as hell, but I felt confident regardless. I think when my mum heard what Craig wanted me to do, she gained a certain level of respect for him. I hate to admit it, but I think they were glad I wasn't in town with Violet on the loose. My new job was pretty nice. My boss wasn't a total piece of shit, only a partial one. Sure, the wait staff ignored me like they did at my last job. However, the cooks seemed to like me. The guy I replaced was apparently a lazy piece of shit, so they appreciated my hard work. After my shifts, myself and the cooks would have safety meetings. If you know, you know. About a month into the new job, I told one of my new co-workers about my inability to dream. I told them about the experimental pills and my futile efforts to dream using Benadryl. Nah, man. You gotta use something stronger, one of the cooks said. After making sure no one was listening, he talked about some medicine that really get me into the zone. I knew exactly what he was hinting at. Given Craig's history with drugs, I doubt he would have appreciated me going down that road. I turned him down. That wouldn't last long. That night, I had another dream. It wasn't lucid this time. I was a spectator. I saw a waitress I worked with tied to a chair. Craig, his dad, and Violet were standing over her. Craig was holding a knife. "You've got this, son." Craig's dad was quietly egging on his son. I tried to scream and get Craig's attention, but I had no mouth to scream with. I watched as Violet placed a knife in Craig's hand. The one he had been holding, having seemingly vanished. The waitress squirmed, her hair flailing wildly as she tried to escape. I tried everything I could to get Craig's attention, but I was pretty much a phantom with a pair of eyes. I watched in horror as Craig started cutting strips of flesh from the waitress's arms, exposing muscle tissue beneath. Her screams of terror and agony were gut-wrenching. See what beautiful music he makes. I hear my own voice say, he's nearby, and his message is clear. I awoke and rushed to the bathroom to puke. The next day after work, I told my co-worker I wanted to take his offer. He sold me some prescription pills. I was scared to take them though. By this point, Craig had opened up to me and told me some stories of his low points with his drug addiction. Out of respect for him, I won't mention them here. I'll just say he struggled hard. I felt like I would be disrespecting him and his struggles if I voluntarily started going down that road. Still, I didn't want him to become corrupted like Violet and his dad were. I would need to exercise extreme caution with these pills. I had seen From Hell, that movie with Johnny Depp. I saw how they could work, but also knew it was a slippery slope. The first night didn't give me any results. The next only brought me running down an infinite pixelated hallway, trying to catch up to the man. This dream would repeat once a week, but it was dreamless the rest of the time. Meanwhile, Craig was getting more and more worried about me. He knew something was up. To ease off his suspicions, I would have nights where I didn't take anything. However, those nights were the worst. The dreams of Craig carving up someone would come out. The first dream had been the waitress. Each repetition would bring up someone I was closer and closer to. After my brother appeared in a dream, I made sure to take at least one pill every night. The pills were getting more and more expensive. My co-worker, now my dealer, was jacking up the prices now that he had me by the curlies. I hated the pills, but I needed them if I was going to find a way to save Craig. I had to do this. The dreams would become less vivid, so I would up the dosage. Craig and I's erratic schedules meant Craig didn't see me at my worst normally, but he was definitely suspicious. We argued a lot. I had stopped cooking. He had to pick up the slack. I think he knew I was on drugs, but he just didn't want to admit it. I think he was in denial. One day, I noticed my bottle of pills was gone from my bag. Craig had been through it. My heart raced. I knew what my dreams would be like if I didn't have them. I knew what the man would do to Craig. I tore the apartment apart looking for them. Deep down, I knew he had flushed them. The empty bottle in the trash solidified that for me. I screamed. I cried. I broke things. No, this couldn't happen. I needed them. I had to save Craig. You've gone mad, Alice. I heard my own voice say. The man was in the kitchen with me. His hard head. It looked like his skull had unnatural angles to it. The fuck do you want? I snapped. Same thing you want, frankly. To be happy. And doing that requires you driving my loved ones insane? Of course not, Alice, the man said, chuckling. He was starting to pace around me, his hands behind his back. Then why do you do it? I didn't do anything. I'm just a figment of your imagination, the man said, my own laughter escaping his mouth. I stood there, trembling. My eyes widened. No way. This wasn't right. He's just a figment? What about Craig's dad? What about Violet? Violet saw a man with a weirdly shaped head. I'm no psychologist, so I can't tell you why, but the human mind is wonderfully suggestive. She talked about seeing me. So you started seeing me when your own mind started to go. The man said in a sing-song voice, like it was incredibly amusing to him. You made the connections where there were none. You don't even know if Craig's dad was even seeing me. No. His madness didn't come from hallucinations. His madness came from grief and loss. He wanted to replace his son, but I think you knew that. You're full of shit. You're warping their minds. I snapped back. There was no way this entity was telling the truth. He couldn't be trusted. He's lying. Oh, let me guess. You think I'm some eldritch Lovecraftian god like Slenderman or something? No, if I were really that old, I wouldn't be quoting Alice in Wonderland all the time, the man said, sounding like he felt insulted. I mean, how cliche can you get? You couldn't have picked a more obscure tale about going mad for me to quote. Or even make up something else. Put some effort into it, Alice. I fell to my knees. No, this couldn't be true. Something more had to be happening. It couldn't be so simple. It had to be more. If it wasn't, then all this was for nothing. If he spoke the truth, that meant I drove myself insane. Violet was dealing with her issues long before you ever knew about it. Craig's father had been dealing with his issues before you and Craig ever met, the man said. All sense of jovialness was gone from his demeanour. He was getting serious. He grabbed me by my shirt collar. I'm not putting Craig in danger. You are. Stop. Stop gaslighting me, I said softly. This wasn't right. It was then I felt arms wrap round me. Craig had come home and saw me collapsed on the floor. It'll be okay, he whispered as he rocked me in his arms. I've been writing this over the course of a couple of days, under the advice of Dr. Garcia. Craig had called her number and she was helping me with my issues. Looking back at the earlier pages of this post, I find myself heartbroken that I put Craig through this. I think I was still going through some lingering withdrawal when I wrote those pages. I don't know what I would do without Craig. I stopped taking the pills and found a new job. I still crave them, and my nightmares are awful. But Craig is always there when I wake up. My new job gave me a more steady schedule, and Craig started taking only daytime jobs. So Craig and I were able to spend every night together. I started cooking again. Craig has gained a good amount of weight. I find it so weird that this all started with a hacked Pokemon cartridge of all things. I still see the man. Perhaps I always will. But things will be okay. I will be okay. Thank you, Craig, for being there for me. I love you.